So, are we allowed to think aloud here?
Yes.
Yes, yes, you're allowed to think as aloud as you can.
He's right.
One of my biggest issues with our institutions, we are still stuck in being part of the geopolitical and theological debates of the Middle East and Arab world and South Asia and the Dacian world and all of those areas. And that still is creeping and impacting our communities here. And so if we have those baggages from back, those are countries of origin, we bring them into our mosques, our institutions, our politics. We will not be able to create safe spaces that allow for young people to really understand their identity. For instance, growing up, our initially the youth group that we went to, we had both. It wasn't gender segregated.
Wait, Harris.
It was guys sat on one side. Yeah.
Just make sure
Oh,
the.
okay. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
All right, I'll actually hold it up. So the boys sat on one side and the girls sat on another side. Simple, there wasn't gender segregation more than that. As I started to get older, our communities actually started to implement more severe and stricter gender segregation norms. So not only do you have now a whole, what do you call it, in between the boys and the girls, like a whole
Literally a barrier wall, like a
a wall, but you started to have them at different times in different rooms, and they would never see each other, and they would be kept separate, and the activities were different, and the activities were at different times. And you expect these young men and women who are learning what it means to engage the opposite gender, learning what it means to start to think, settling down in life, eventually being able to meet someone and have a healthy relationship and then have a healthy marriage. All of that without exposing them to engagement within their own community. So they go to school, they can sit next to a boy or a girl, engage them in any way they want, have conversations, and then they come to our institutions or even to the house, and it's a whole different set of understanding of values. That in itself creates a dichotomy inside of us, and we start to process things where we're like, oh, so what is Islam actually? So is Islam this or is it not? And so we're constantly going through the struggle, even in our mere existence. So it's not even someone telling you that this is Islam or not. Just your daily experience becomes a struggle for you. And that becomes a burden. And so when you talked about earlier that people are embarrassed to identify as Muslims, I mean, I have a 19 and a 20-year-old. Of course, I would expect that there was times that they would probably be embarrassed to be Muslim. And I've had this conversation with them. Because what they see around them is negative. What they see within their communities is at times negative. What they see in their institutions is negative. And then even the people who are speaking on their behalf generally don't represent their ideas, their upbringing, their background. And so, of course, either two things are going to happen. One, either they're going to completely leave the community, which is happening in large numbers. They don't identify as Muslim. Mainly, they identify as like cultural Muslims. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm Muslim, but beyond that, that's it. Or they are attracted to more extreme ideas. They get into this like weird rabbit hole of online, extremism and what Islam is really not, but they get exposed to extreme ideas. And those ideas are comforting to them because they reinforce the fact that they're different, that they're not the same, that they are separate from the society. And so those are very natural reactions to what they feel outside of them.
And when I brought this up to my local MSA, like I go to UMBC, when I brought this up to the UMBC MSA, I was like, why isn't the MSA group chat open? Why is it that only the administrators and the cabinet members are the ones that can send messages in. Why aren't we allowed? It's like, oh, because there's boys and girls. It's like, well, this is a public GM. It's not like there's like 50 to 100 people in this group message. What are you gonna do? So all you're doing basically, and you have access to these people's contact information on this WhatsApp. So you want people, rather than to be able to publicly speak in front of boys and girls, you want them to hit up the girls privately? Is that better?
You DM them rather than speak on the public chat.
Exactly. I mean, you brought up something massively important. I was ostracized for that. And I was basically like, oh, what do you want to hit on the girls? What do you? It's like, dude, what? That's not at all what I was trying to say. I was saying exactly what you're saying. Is that when you live in a society that basically says sex is okay, so many things are okay, and the society is actually pushing towards you should be able to wear and dress however you want, and which is true in a way, but not when it comes to not dressing at all. So our society is trying to push towards almost making naked normal, and then we go into our institutions or into our MSAs that are supposed to be comforting for us, and they're instead this complete opposite extremity where you are not even allowed to speak to the other gender. Well, how am I? And then you want me to find a good person to marry? How am I supposed to find someone to marry if I'm not even allowed to? I have never spoken to a Muslim girl in my life, except maybe in the last couple months, outside of my sisters. I have never spoken. The only girls I've ever spoken to were American girls.
Yeah, people at school.
Exactly. So why would I marry a Muslim girl when I don't even know what they're like? And how do you expect us to come together as Muslims when 50% of us aren't allowed to speak to the other 50% of us? It makes absolutely no sense.
That's why you see a mass migration away from institutions, right? So now people are thinking critically. So if a person is saying, I always put it this way, I can go and have a very nice dinner with my family, everyone in my family, with my daughter and my son and everyone, and be able to go have a dinner, but then go also to a movie or go to a play or go to a lecture. And I can't even go to my most intimate place of worship and also be able to sit in a way, for a lecture at least. I mean, not for prayer. Prayer has its own rules, but for a lecture or a public conversation together and talk and engage and learn from other families and engage them. How do I build a social community? Our faith is a social faith, and people don't realize that. What do I mean by social faith? I mean that if you even look at our basic pillars of faith, they're generally promoted to do them in congregation. You are encouraged to pray together in groups. You are encouraged to engage each other in fasting in groups. Like so much of our faith is part of like social, of a social interaction of human beings. And if you don't facilitate that in a healthy form for everyone, it happens. People move away from that. People are like, I can't go to a lecture with my family. Forget that. I'm just going to do it at home. And so that's why now you're seeing all of these what are called third spaces that are popping up, right? So places that are not mosques, places that are not institutions, but places that are like community centers where people get together and it almost functions as a mosque, but they're called third spaces. You have like Make Space in the Northern Virginia area. You have a Leave Collective in Chicago and in the Bay Area. So every major city you see now these third spaces that are popping up because people want to be able to function in a way where they feel normal.
It's literally normal.
Just normal.
Yeah.
Just normal. And so it's sad, like, for you, this is like over 20 years, like 20, almost 20 years later, more than 20 years later, for you to tell me that the same experience that you're going through, I went through when I was growing up as a teenager. That tells you that we still have a lot of work to do. Our institutions are not fully there. And to be honest, the sad part of that is what you spoke about an MSA. And an MSA, and in a place where there's supposed to be some critical thinking and engagement on these issues at a higher level, it's happening. So could you imagine a local youth group?
Yeah, I can't even blame our mosques who are ran by
Right,
40 to 50, 60-year-old dudes when
right.
15 to 20-year-old kids are thinking exactly the same way. And I'm looked
Exactly.
at as this person who's trying to like dilute the religion. It's like, well, nowhere in the religion does it say that I can't speak to a woman like that.
Right.
That's not how things work. And we had a public group message we have on Instagram right now that is beautiful. I mean, it's awesome because all they do is we talk about Islam, we talk about Muslim issues, and this girl literally just yesterday was like, "Well, isn't this group message a little hypocritical?" And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Well, there's gender mixing, public gender mixing." It's like, what does that mean? Like, you have to dig deep into these things. Like, what was Islam speaking about when it was saying,
Right.
and it just doesn't make sense. It's not helpful. And as you said, if it's the same things that you went through when you were growing up, that means that our institutions and our community is not on the same level and playing field and is not updated to the troubles and situations that Muslims in modern times go through. It's
Yeah.
nowhere even near it.
I was reading this. I was reading this book recently, and one of the lines, the author was talking about um, how do faith communities reconcile? Because this is not just something that Muslims have gone through. Actually, most faith communities kind of go through these uh, difficulties. So if you see Jewish community evolved in America, you'll see some of the very same trend lines. If you see Catholic institutions, very much some of the same trend lines. And then what happens is communities actually break up, and then you have all of these different denominations that form. And you're actually slowly starting to see that amongst Muslims as well. Um, but the question is, do you want our institutions, whether they be masajid or any institution that's of service to people who are going through life, the days of life, do you want our mosques to be hospitals for the sick, or do you want them to be museums for saints?
Hmm.
Right. So that's how this individual basically was trying the metaphor he was giving. But he was saying, because if you want it to be a hospital for the sick, then you have to allow people who are sick to come in, and you're going to engage difficult issues, and you're going to do healing, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's going to be messy, and there's going to be blood all over the place, and there's going to be medication that needs to be given, and it's a messy, active, vibrant place where you're trying to heal people. If you want it to be a museum that looks really angelic and it's for saints only, then there's not going to be much activity. Yes, there'll be pictures of saints, and you're gonna have, all of this people. Some people come and pray for a little and then leave, but there will be no life. There'll be no mistakes made. There'll be no healing done. It'll just be a place of, admiration of, like, oh wow, this used to be. This is like really. It's I get a good feeling when I come in, but then I leave, and that's it. Um, Unfortunately, most of our institutions are museums for saints. They're not places where healing takes place, because we all know, as human beings, every single one of us needs healing, spiritual healing. We need that engagement, and when you're not allowed to go through that and make mistakes and then still be accepted, how do you expect people to come to you?
Yeah, and it's highly misunderstood. And I think one last thing on this is the Muslim women suffer from the butt end of this stick.
Yeah.
because when you start making these separations, then you're not even accommodating for it by making it if you're gonna make it separate, at least make it separate and equal. It's separate and
Separate and
unequal.
equal, right?
Yeah,
Right.
they make it where the woman's section literally looks like a closet. And when a
Yeah.
girl that converts, or a girl that basically a girl that, even a Muslim girl that goes back to her religion, which, by the way, people who are Muslim that were born and raised Muslim and kind of move away from their religion and come back to it need the same kind of emotional, spiritual health as
Oh,
someone
of
who
course.
converted to Islam without ever being Muslim before that. And so
Oh,
when these
definitely.
kind of people, when these kind of girls walk into their institutions, to their mosques, and they look at a Harry Potter closet like area, and they're yelled at not to come into the men's section and not to speak to the imam, and the imam will send over a representative. How should they not think of this religion as sexist? How should they not think of our religion as, if we're a religion that preaches it's for all people, if it's for all worlds, then how do we make 50% of that world feel like outcasts and that they're lesser than in our institutions? It's deeply,
Oh, definitely.
deeply hypocritical.